Marisol Carter had always trusted her instincts. At 68 years old, with a career as a nurse behind her and decades of raising a son on her own, her intuition had saved her from countless mistakes. Yet, as she sat alone in her living room, the faint hum of the newly repaired surveillance system in the background, she realized her instincts had failed her where it mattered most, her own flesh and blood. It had been 3 days since she called the technician. The cameras had been broken for weeks, leaving her uneasy. Living alone was no easy thing, but she wasn't truly alone anymore. Her son Marcus and his wife Angelica had convinced her that moving into her house was best for everyone. "We'll take care of you, Mom," Marcus had promised, smiling that familiar smile that reminded her of his childhood innocence. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that her boy, the same one who used to cry when she left him with babysitters, still cherished her. Instead, she had slowly begun to feel like a guest in her own home. They had taken over the kitchen, rearranged the furniture, and even decided what groceries she should or shouldn't buy. Still, Marisol told herself it was worth the sacrifice. At least she had company. At least she had family around. But that morning, something tugged at her. A whisper in her chest urged her to test the camera system on her phone. The app was simple. The technician had shown her just the night before. Tap the icon, select the room, and watch live footage. She expected an empty living room. Marcus was supposed to be out on a job interview, and Angelica had gone grocery shopping. What she saw instead froze her blood. There they were. Marcus sat on the couch, his broad shoulders hunched over a folder she recognized instantly. It was the leather-bound folder that held her most important documents: property deeds, insurance policies, her will. That folder had always been locked away in the desk in her bedroom. She hadn't taken it out. So how did Marcus have it? Angelica sat across from him, papers spread like a fan across the coffee table. She lifted each one to the light from the window, her face stern, her eyes cold. She wasn't skimming, she was scrutinizing, hunting for something specific. Marisol pressed her phone closer to her chest, as though Marcus might sense her through the camera. Her heart thundered. She turned on the audio feed. "Where's the original deed?" Angelica's voice cut through the silence. There was no warmth, no trace of the sweet tone she used when speaking to Mary. It was sharp, calculated. "Albert said we need the original for the forgery to hold up." Marisol's breath caught. Albert, she knew that name. A shady lawyer Marcus had befriended months ago, the kind of man who made her skin crawl. She had warned Marcus about him, but he'd laughed it off. Now she understood why the man's presence had unsettled her so deeply. "It has to be here," Marcus muttered, frustration edging his tone. "Mom keeps everything organized. Too organized. She doesn't throw anything away." The way he said organized felt like a curse, as though her careful habits were now an obstacle to his greed. Angelica lifted another paper to the sunlight. A cruel smile touched her lips. "Look at this appraisal. The house is worth over $500,000. Albert was right, it's worth all this trouble. $500,000. Marisol had worked 30 years as a nurse to buy this home, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. It was the place she'd raised Marcus after his father left. It was supposed to be Marcus's inheritance someday, not something he and Angelica could steal from under her feet while she was still alive. Angelica's next words pierced her like a knife. "Once the deed is in our names, we can sell it, move her into a small apartment. A 1-bedroom will be enough for her last years." Her last years. Marisol nearly dropped the phone. They were talking about her life as though it were a burden, a problem to be solved with square footage. She wasn't a person to them anymore. She was an obstacle. On the screen, Marcus stood and strode toward her bedroom. Panic surged. She switched cameras and saw him rifling through her drawers, his movements frantic. "She's got to have a safe deposit box," he muttered. "She's paranoid about documents." Paranoid, another word turned against her. Her carefulness, once a point of pride, was now ammunition for their betrayal. When Marcus returned to the living room empty-handed, Angelica crossed her arms. "Albert gave us until Friday," she reminded him. "Without the deed, he can't do the job. And without the job, we're stuck living off crumbs." Marisol whispered aloud. The $700 she gave them each month from her modest pension money, she could scarcely afford, was crumbs to them. Marcus slumped into her favorite armchair, rubbing his forehead. "We'll pressure her more. Tell her it's medical insurance papers. She's been so confused lately, she won't even read before signing." Marisol's stomach turned. Yes, sometimes she struggled with dates or misplaced her keys, normal lapses of age, but But Marcus and Angelica had been spinning those lapses into a story, painting her as senile, incapable, confused. What if she gets suspicious? Angelica asked. Marcus shrugged, his face carved with indifference. What's she going to do? Call the cops on her own son. Once Albert has the deed, it'll be too late anyway. Angelica's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Perfect. Tomorrow, we'll bring her the forged documents. She leaned toward Marcus, her hand on his shoulder. Think about our future, Marcus. The kids we'll have. Do you want to depend on an old woman who gets more useless every day? This house is our chance to be independent. Marisol felt something inside her shatter. Her son, her only child, sat in her living room, planning her downfall. Angelica's venom had poisoned him completely. She stared at her phone, her hand trembling. She had 3 days' worth of recordings, 3 days of betrayal captured in crystal clarity. It was evidence strong enough to ruin them forever, and yet she couldn't call the police. Not yet. Somewhere deep in her heart, the mother in her whispered, "Give him a chance. Maybe he'll come to his senses." But another voice, stronger, fiercer, replied, "They're planning to erase you, Mary. If you don't act, you'll be gone before you realize it." As the camera feed flickered back to the quiet living room, Marisol wiped a tear from her cheek. She wasn't ready to involve the authorities. Not yet. She needed to confront them, to see Marcus's face when he realized. She knew, because if she was going down, she was going down fighting. The night after Marisol's discovery was long and restless. Rain lashed against the windows, the kind of soft, steady drizzle that used to soothe her to sleep. But tonight, the sound only reminded her of tears she could not shed. She sat upright in bed, the glow of her phone screen illuminating her round face. Every few minutes she replayed the footage, Marcus's frustration, Angelica's cold calculations, the mention of Albert and the forged deed. Each time she told herself she had imagined it, that perhaps she had misheard. But the recordings didn't lie. Her son was planning to steal her life out from under her. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep. She shuffled into the kitchen, her slippers brushing the linoleum, and poured herself a cup of chamomile tea. The silence of the house pressed against her chest. Just 2 doors away, Marcus and Angelica slept peacefully in the guest bedroom that had become their permanent quarters. How strange it felt to brew tea in her own home, knowing that behind closed doors, her son dreamed of her ruin. Marisol sipped and thought. Her first instinct was to call the police, but then she pictured Marcus in handcuffs. The boy she had raised alone, the boy who had once clutched her hand in the schoolyard, gone, destroyed by her own testimony. The thought twisted her stomach. No, not yet. Instead, she would gather more evidence. She needed to understand how deep this plan went, how far Angelica had poisoned Marcus's heart. The cameras gave her a vantage point, a silent window into their true selves. The next morning, she kept her phone tucked in her pocket, the live feed streaming as she busied herself in the kitchen. Marcus and Angelica left their room late, dressed casually, not a trace of guilt on their faces. "Morning, Mom," Marcus said with a yawn, kissing her cheek. The warmth of his lips felt like fire against her skin. Angelica poured herself coffee without asking. "We're heading out later. Might stop by Albert's office." Marisol's grip tightened on the spatula she held. "Albert," she repeated, feigning ignorance. Angelica smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Yes, you remember Albert. He's been helping Marcus with some legal paperwork." Marisol forced a nod, pretending to be distracted with breakfast. Inside, her chest burned. By midday, they had gone out, and Marisol returned to her phone. She flipped through cameras like a conductor scanning sheet music. Every angle told a story. The living room where they schemed, the hallway they paced, the kitchen where Angelica whispered in Marcus's ear. On the feed, Angelica appeared with her laptop open, papers spread across the couch. Marcus paced restlessly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Albert says the documents are ready," Angelica said, her voice crisp. "He just needs the original deed for signature comparison. He'll finish the forgery by Friday." Marisol felt her stomach clench. Friday, just 3 days away. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. What if she refuses to sign anything? Angelica snapped the laptop shut. "Then we make her. We've been planting the seed for months. She forgets dates, misplaces things. Albert said the court would accept medical proof of cognitive decline." Marcus frowned. "She's not incompetent. She doesn't need to be incompetent, Marcus. She just needs to look that way on paper. A doctor's note here, a little pressure there. Trust me, Albert knows how to handle it." Marisol's breath came shallow. They were building a case to declare her unfit, to erase her with ink and lies. That evening, she sat across from them at dinner. Angelica passed the peas. Marcus laughed about a television show, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. But Marisol could see the cracks. The way Marcus avoided her eyes, the way Angelica dominated every conversation. Her hand always brushing Marcus's arm, her voice sliding into his ear like poison dot. She studied them like a nurse studying a patient's pulse. She saw the illness in their ambition, the rot of greed that had eaten away at their love. When the dishes were cleared, Angelica leaned forward. Marisol, we've been thinking, maybe it's time to update your legal paperwork. You know, just in case something happens, for your own good. Marisol forced a polite smile, though her heart raced. Oh, what kind of paperwork? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but Angelica pressed on. Power of attorney. It would make things easier if you ever couldn't make decisions for yourself. Marisol let out a soft laugh, careful not to reveal the storm inside her. I'll think about it. Later that night, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. Her round face, her curly hair streaked with gray, the lines etched by years of sacrifice. This was the woman Angelica wanted to erase. A burden, a stepping stone, an obstacle. No, Marisol whispered to her reflection. I am not done yet. She knew what she had to do. If Angelica and Marcus thought she was weak, she would use that against them. She would play along, nod when they spoke, smile when they lied, and all the while, the cameras would capture everything, because the camera never lied. Marisol woke before dawn, her body heavy but her mind raised. She moved quietly through the house, slippered feet brushing the carpet, her phone clasped like a talisman. Every room now felt like a stage where betrayal played out. She brewed coffee and thought of her plan. If Marcus and Angelica believed she was losing her grip on reality, then she would give them exactly that, not out of surrender, but as a weapon. She would let them think their whispers had worked, that her mind was fogging over. Meanwhile, her cameras and recordings would collect every piece of their cruelty. By mid, she had her first chance. Angelica entered the kitchen, sleek in her workout clothes, her phone in hand. Good morning, Marisol, she said, too brightly. Marisol turned slowly, as if startled. She let her eyes linger on the counter before looking up. Oh, Angelica, I didn't hear you. Angelica's lips curved into a smile, a satisfied smile. That's all right. Did you sleep well? I can't remember, Marisol murmured, lowering her gaze to her coffee. She let her shoulders sag. Angelica studied her for a long moment, then excused herself. The second she was gone, Marisol's lips tightened. The act had worked. Later that day, Marcus found her in the garden. He had his father's eyes warm brown, though dimmed by uncertainty. He sat beside her on the bench, fiddling with his wedding ring. Mom, he began softly. You've been forgetting things lately. Dates, times. Angelica's worried. Marisol let her hands tremble slightly in her lap. Maybe I am getting old, she whispered. His jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. For a fleeting second, Marisol saw her son, the boy who once held her hand during thunderstorms. But then Angelica's voice echoed from the porch. Marcus, come inside. We need to make that call. And just like that, the warmth in his eyes flickered out. He rose without another word, leaving Marisol alone with the buzzing of cicadas. That night, the cameras gave her another gift. From her bedroom, she watched the feed of the living room. Angelica paced, phone pressed to her ear. Marcus sat hunched over the coffee table, papers spread out. Yes, Albert, Angelica said sharply. She's slipping already. Yesterday she forgot where she left her keys. Today she looked confused in the kitchen. We'll have the paperwork signed by Friday. Marcus rubbed his forehead. I don't like this Angie. She's still my mom. Angelica stopped pacing. Her eyes narrowed. And she's sitting on the only thing keeping us from a real future. Do you want that restaurant or not? Do you want to keep struggling, paycheck to paycheck, while she clings to a house she barely maintains? Marcus said nothing. Silence stretched like a knife. Finally, he nodded. Marisol, single quotes. His chest ached as she watched. Her son's silence was the deepest betrayal of all. The next morning, Marisol took her act further. She forgot to turn off the stove, leaving the pot to boil over. She misplaced her reading glasses, though they sat in plain sight. She even let herself stumble on the stairs, clutching the railing dramatically. Angelica noticed everything. Each slip of memory, each tremor in her voice, fed the woman's smug confidence. But what Angelica didn't notice was the small recorder Marisol had tucked inside her robe pocket. Every conversation, every manipulation, it was all being preserved. 3 days later, Angelica struck Marisol. She said sweetly over dinner, "Marcus and I have been talking. We think it's time to make things official. Just some simple paperwork to make sure your wishes are honored if anything ever happens." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Marisol forced a shaky smile. "Paperwork?" she asked. "Yes, power of attorney, mostly. It's just a formality. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." Marisol lowered her fork with trembling hands. "If you think it's for the best," she whispered. Angelica's eyes gleamed. That night, Marisol sat alone in her bedroom, the papers lying untouched on her dresser. Her chest tightened, her breathing shallow. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry, but tears blurred her vision anyway. It wasn't just about the house, it was about her dignity, her son's loyalty, her right to exist without being erased. She wiped her cheeks, lifted her chin, and whispered into the empty room, "They think I'm weak. Let them. By the time this is over, the whole world will know the truth." Her reflection in the mirror looked back at her tired, yes, but unbroken. The mask of frailty had become her shield. Marisol's hands shook as she folded the stack of legal papers Angelica had left on her dresser. She had skimmed enough to know the truth. If she signed, she would lose control of everything: the house, the savings, even her medical decisions. She would become a guest in her own life. But she also knew she couldn't refuse too quickly. Angelica would smell the resistance and push harder. Marisol had to play the role until the moment she was ready to strike. The next morning, she brewed coffee slowly, her motions deliberately unsteady. Angelica waltzed into the kitchen with the air of a woman who already owned the place. "Morning, Marisol," she chimed, pouring herself coffee before even greeting Marcus. "Did you have a chance to look at those papers?" Marisol let her gaze drift to the window. "Yes, but the words are so small, hard to understand." Angelica's smile sharpened. "Don't worry, that's why Marcus and I are here. We'll take care of everything." Marisol forced a soft laugh, lowering her eyes like a scolded child. Inside, fury burned. Later that day, Marcus sat with her in the living room, while Angelica took a call in the hallway. He picked up one of the papers, tapping it nervously against his knee. "Mom," he said quietly, "you know Angelica just wants what's best for you. This is about protecting you." Marisol studied him. His words were rehearsed, but his eyes, those eyes still flickered with doubt. She decided to press gently. "Marcus, do you really believe that?" He looked away. "I don't know anymore." Before Marisol could speak, Angelica re-entered, voice crisp. "Marcus, Albert wants us to bring the original deed by tomorrow. He can finalize everything once he has it." Marisol's heart stopped. The original deed locked away in the small safe in her bedroom closet. If Angelica got her hands on it, everything would unravel. That night, Marisol moved silently through the darkened house. She opened her closet, dragged out the safe, and sat cross-legged on the carpet. Her fingers trembled as she spun the dial. Inside lay her most precious documents: her husband's death certificate, her will, and the deed to the house. She lifted the deed carefully, the paper fragile from decades of storage. Her husband's signature at the bottom still looked bold, defiant, alive. Tears stung her eyes. "They'll never take this from me," she thought. She slipped the deed into a manila envelope and carried it to the attic. There, beneath a stack of dusty holiday decorations, she hid it in a tin box, wrapping it in old newspaper for camouflage. Only she knew where it was now. The next afternoon, Angelica cornered her in the kitchen. "Marisol," she said sweetly, "where do you keep the deed? Albert just needs it for a quick reference." Marisol widened her eyes innocently. "The deed? I don't remember. Maybe the basement." Angelica's smile faltered for a split second. "Well, that's fine. We'll look for it later." When she turned away, Marisol caught a flash of frustration in her eyes. That evening, Marisol checked her cameras again. On the feed, she watched Angelica rifling through her bedroom drawers, muttering under her breath. Marcus stood by the door, his arms crossed, his face pale. "Help me look," Angelica snapped. "She's hiding it." Marcus hesitated. "Maybe we should just stop. This is too much." Angelica spun on him. "Stop, and throw away everything we've worked for. Do you want to go back to scraping rent money every month? That deed is our ticket out of misery. Now help me." Marisol clenched her fists as she watched. Her son moved slowly, reluctantly, pulling open drawers under his mother's watchful gaze, but the deed was safe. For now. The next day, Angelica shifted tactics. Over breakfast, she leaned across the table, her voice dripping with concern. Marisol, I noticed you've been misplacing things a lot. Yesterday it was your wallet, last week it was the stove. Maybe it's time we schedule the doctor's appointment. Marisol swallowed, lowering her gaze. Doctor? Angelica nodded firmly. Yes, just to make sure everything's okay. We wouldn't want the court to think she stopped herself. Catching Marcus's glare, Marisol hid her smile behind her coffee cup. The court? Angelica had tipped her hand again. That night, Marisol recorded a message on her phone. Her voice shook, but her words were steady. This is Marisol Jameson. If anyone finds this, know that my son and his wife are trying to take my home from me. They want me declared incompetent, but I am not. I am still of sound mind. This recording, and the footage from my cameras, will prove it. She saved the file, locking it with a password only she knew. Insurance for the war that was coming. The tension in the house grew thick. Marcus avoided eye contact, his footsteps heavy with guilt. Angelica grew sharper, her words edged with impatience. And Marisol, she played her part perfectly. She let her hands shake when she lifted her teacup. She stumbled over words, pretended to forget details. Angelica drank it all in, convinced victory was near. But in the shadows, the deed lay hidden, and Marisol's quiet war was just beginning. The house no longer felt like a home. Every sound was sharpened footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking open, hushed voices drifting from the living room. Marisol moved carefully through the space she had once ruled with warmth, her every step guided by the knowledge that predators now lived under her roof. But she was no prey. She had her cameras, she had her recordings, and now she had a plan. That morning, Angelica appeared at the breakfast table in a tailored blazer, her hair swept into a sleek bun. Marcus and I are meeting Albert today, she announced. We'll get the last set of documents reviewed. All we need is that deed. Marisol, did you remember where you put it? Marisol let her eyes widen, her lips tremble. Oh, I looked, but it's gone. Maybe I threw it out. Angelica's fork clattered against her plate. Threw it out, Marisol. That deed is essential. Marcus cleared his throat. We'll check the attic, Mom. Don't worry. Marisol nodded meekly, her gaze lowered. Inside, her heart pounded. Let them search. The more frantic they became, the more desperate their words and the stronger her evidence. That afternoon, Marisol positioned a small voice recorder beneath the sofa cushions in the living room. She had tested it twice. It worked flawlessly, capturing every whisper. Then she retreated upstairs, pretending to nap, while her phone streamed the live camera feed. She didn't have to wait long. On the screen, Angelica strode into the living room, her heels clicking sharply. Marcus followed, his shoulders slumped. She's lying, Angelica hissed, tossing papers onto the coffee table. The deed is here, somewhere. I know it. Marcus rubbed his temples. Maybe she really doesn't remember. Angelica whirled on him. Don't be naive. She's playing games. But it doesn't matter. Albert says if we get a doctor's statement of mental decline, we can bypass her signature entirely. Marisol leaned closer to the phone screen, her pulse racing. Marcus shifted uneasily. That feels wrong. She's not sick. She's just old, Angelica snapped, and standing in the way of our future. Marcus, do you want that restaurant or not? Do you want to keep living paycheck to paycheck while your mother hoards everything? Silence. Then Marcus whispered, no. Marisol's throat tightened. Her recorder was catching every word, every poisonous seed Angelica planted. That night, Marisol retrieved the recorder and listened. Angelica's voice oozed through the speakers, venom disguised as ambition. She saved the file onto a hidden flash drive, labeling it Evidence 1. She stared at the small device in her palm. This was more than proof. It was her shield, her sword, her truth. The next day, Angelica pushed harder. Marisol, she said sweetly over tea, Marcus and I scheduled you a doctor's appointment for next week. Just a routine checkup. Marisol let her hands tremble, her eyes dart nervously. A checkup, but I feel fine. Angelica patted her hand condescendingly. It's just to be safe. We want to make sure you're healthy. Courts like to see documentation. Marisol froze. Angelica had said the quiet part out loud again. She masked her shock with a wavering smile. Of course, dear, she whispered. Inside her fury blazed. She would let them take her to the doctor. Yes, but she would also prepare her own statement, her own report. If they wanted paperwork, she would drown them in truth against lies. That evening, Marisol called an old friend, Evelyn, who worked part-time at a local legal office. She spoke quietly into the phone, her bedroom door locked. Evelyn, I need your help, she whispered. I think Marcus and his wife are trying to take my house from me. They want to declare me incompetent. Evelyn gasped. Marisol, that's elder abuse. You need a lawyer. I'm not ready yet, Marisol said quickly. I just need to build my case. Can you help me document everything properly? Evelyn hesitated. Then her voice firmed. Yes, whatever you need. Relief washed over Marisol. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Later, as she tucked her phone under her pillow, Marisol whispered to herself, they think they're writing my ending, but I'll write it myself. Her reflection in the darkened mirror across the room stared, eyes tired but burning with quiet rage. The betrayal was still unfolding, but now, the betrayal was being recorded. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, but the warmth it carried no longer comforted Mary. She woke to the sound of Angelica humming downstairs, the tune oddly sharp, like a blade disguised as a lullaby. Marisol, dressed slowly, bracing herself. She knew today would bring another battle. At breakfast, Marcus pushed a stack of papers across the table. Mom, these are just routine authorizations, he said casually. Insurance updates, bank details, things to make life easier for you. Angelica smiled, her lipstick gleaming. We'll explain everything. You just sign, and it'll all be settled. Marisol lifted the first page, her fingers trembling deliberately. She scanned the dense paragraphs of legal jargon. Words like power of attorney and transfer of rights leaped out at her. Her stomach clenched. They weren't even hiding it anymore. I don't understand, she murmured. Angelica leaned forward, voice syrupy. That's why you have us, Maurice. We'll handle everything for you. Marcus placed a pen in her hand. Just sign. Marisol stared at the pen. Then she set it down. Later, I'll read them properly first. Angelica's smile faltered. Upstairs, Marisol slipped into her bedroom and closed the door. She pulled out her flash drive, plugging it into her old laptop. File after file appeared. Hours of recordings, captured whispers, cruel laughter, schemes spoken in her own living room. Evidence 2, evidence 3, evidence 4. She was building a fortress of proof, but the fortress needed allies. She emailed Evelyn a set of files, her fingers shaking as she hit send. If anything happens to me, she typed, give these to the police. That afternoon, she sat knitting in the living room while Angelica clicked away on her laptop. Albert says we're running out of time. Angelica muttered, we need that deed, Marcus. Marcus sighed. She won't hand it over. Maybe she doesn't even remember where it is. She remembers, Angelica snapped. She's stalling, and if she won't cooperate, we'll make her. No extras, no insurance, no car. Let her struggle on her pension until she caves. Marisol's needles never stopped moving, but her mind screamed. They were tightening the noose, stripping away every comfort to break her will. She lowered her gaze, hiding the small camera tucked into a vase nearby. It captured everything that evening. Angelica cornered her in the hallway. Marisol, she said softly, but her eyes glittered. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're family. We're doing this for your own good. Marisol forced a weak smile. I know, dear. I trust you. Angelica studied her face for a long moment, searching for cracks. Finally, she smirked. Good. Then tomorrow, we'll go see Dr. Rodriguez. Just a little test, to make sure you're still capable. The words sliced through Marisol like ice. Capable. That was their strategy. No declare her senile, unfit, then seize everything. But she was ready. That night, Marisol opened her diary, the one she had kept for decades. She wrote in bold, deliberate letters, if Marcus and Angelica attempt to declare me incompetent, I have proof of their conspiracy. I am of sound mind and body. I leave this as my testimony. She tore the page carefully and slipped it into an envelope marked with today's date. She placed it beneath her pillow, beside the flash drive. If they wanted war, she would meet them on the battlefield. The next morning, Marcus drove her to Dr. Rodriguez's office. Angelica sat in the back seat, smiling like a cat who had cornered a mouse. Don't be nervous, Angelica cooed. It's just some simple questions. Colors, dates, your memory, nothing difficult. Marisol gazed out the window, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't nervous, she was prepared. Because this appointment would not be their weapon, it would be hers. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish. Marisol sat between Marcus and Angelica, the two of them flanking her like watchful guards. Angelica scrolled on her phone. Marcus drummed his fingers against his knee. Marisol folded her hands tightly, hiding the small recorder in her purse. She wasn't here to prove her weakness. She was here to prove her strength. When Dr. Rodriguez finally appeared, she smiled warmly. "Marisol," she greeted, embracing her lightly. "It's been too long." Marisol felt her son stiffen beside her. Angelica forced a polite smile. "Doctor," Angelica began quickly, "we're concerned about Marisol's memory. She's been confused, misplacing things, forgetting conversations, showing paranoia. We thought a cognitive assessment might be best." Marisol met Dr. Rodriguez's eyes, steady and calm. The doctor's brow furrowed. "Is that so?" she said softly. "Well, let's do some simple tests." The exam began with questions. Dates, names, short-term recall. "What year is it, Marisol?" 2025, Marisol answered firmly. "And who is the current president?" She gave the correct name without hesitation. Angelica's smile faltered slightly. Dr. Rodriguez continued. "I'm going to say 3 words. Apple, chair, river. Can you repeat them? Apple, chair, river. Now, in a few minutes, I'll ask you to recall them." Marisol nodded calmly. As the minutes ticked by, Marcus fidgeted. Angelica crossed her arms, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, the doctor asked, "Do you remember the 3 words?" "Yes, apple, chair, river." Dr. Rodriguez closed her notebook with a quiet snap. "Her cognitive function is perfectly normal." Angelica leaned forward. "But doctor, she's paranoid. She thinks we're conspiring against her. Isn't that a symptom of decline?" Marisol inhaled slowly. It was time. "Doctor," she said clearly, pulling the flash drive from her purse, "I want you to hear something." Dr. Rodriguez plugged the device into her computer. The office filled with Angelica's voice. "Once we get the deed, we can sell the house and put her in a retirement home." Marcus's voice followed. "What's she going to do? Call the police on her own son?" The doctor's eyes widened. Angelica shot to her feet. "That's illegal. You can't record us without it's my house." Marisol interrupted, her voice hard as steel. "And my cameras. You planned this under my roof. Every word is mine to keep." Marcus's face drained of color. Dr. Rodriguez removed her glasses, her tone sharp. "This is evidence of fraud and elder abuse. Marisol, you are of sound mind. If you want, I can contact the authorities immediately." Angelica's mask cracked. "You can't do this. We were only trying to help." Marisol's voice rose, trembling with years of betrayal. "Help yourselves, maybe, to my house, to my life, to my dignity." Marcus buried his face in his hands. Angelica glared, her eyes burning with fury. After back in the car, the silence was suffocating. Angelica's knuckles were white around the steering wheel. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. "You can't erase us from your life, Marisol. We live with you. We control what happens day to day." Marisol stared out the window, her reflection calm, defiant. "You're right," she said quietly. "You live with me." Then, she turned her head, meeting Angelica's gaze in the mirror, but not for much longer. That night, Marisol sat in her armchair, the same one where she had first seen their betrayal on the camera feed. She held the doctor's written report in her hand, the words bold and undeniable. "Patient demonstrates full cognitive capacity. No signs of dementia or decline." She placed it beside her diary, beside the flash drive. The net was closing not around her, but around them. Tomorrow, she would set the final stage. The house was silent, the kind of silence that thrummed with danger. Marisol sat in her chair by the window, her knitting untouched. The flash drive lay on the table, beside the doctor's report. She had already called Evelyn. She had already made her choice. Tonight would end it. Angelica entered first, heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Marcus followed, shoulders slumped but fists clenched. "We need to talk," Angelica said, her voice low and venomous. Marisol gestured calmly to the sofa. "Then sit. We're family, aren't we?" Marcus dropped into the cushions, rubbing his temples. Angelica remained standing, arms crossed. "You embarrassed us today," Angelica spat. "Do you know what you've done? You've ruined Marcus's reputation. You've ruined our future." "My future was never yours to steal," Marisol replied evenly. Angelica's composure cracked. She lunged toward the table, snatching up the flash drive. "This ends now," she hissed. But before she could snap it in half, a voice called from the hallway. "Put it down." Angelica Evelyn stepped into the room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Their presence filled the air like thunder before a storm. Angelica froze, Marcus's face drained of blood. Marisol rose slowly, her spine straight, her eyes blazing. The officer took the flash drive from Angelica's trembling hand. "We've reviewed the files. Mrs. Alvarez sent us, he said. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, attempted coercion. Angelica tried to laugh, the sound brittle. You can't be serious. It's just family talk, jokes, nothing more. The officer's face remained stoned. Jokes don't involve forging legal documents and planning to strip someone of their property, Marcus whispered. Mom, please, don't do this. Marisol turned to him, her heart heavy yet unyielding. I already gave you everything, Marcus. My love, my trust, and you chose greed. The officers moved forward. Angelica fought, shouting curses that echoed through the house. Marcus simply bowed his head, silent tears staining his cheeks. Marisol stood tall as they were led away. The woman who had once been their victim, now their judge. Evelyn touched her arm gently. It's over, Ma. You're safe. For the first time in months, Marisol allowed herself to breathe deeply. Freely. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains again, but this time, it felt warm. Alive. Marisol brewed a pot of coffee, her kitchen filled with the quiet hum of peace. She looked at the empty chairs where Marcus and Angelica once sat. For a moment, sorrow flickered across her face, but then she straightened. She had lost them long ago. What she had regained was far more precious. Her dignity, her voice, her freedom. Later that week, she walked into the community center, greeted by warm smiles and open arms. Evelyn was there, waving. The book club missed you, she said. Marisol smiled, her eyes shining. I'm back now, and I'm not going anywhere. The women gathered around her, eager to hear her story, her laughter blending with theirs. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a warrior. That night, before bed, Marisol opened her diary once more. She wrote in neat, steady handwriting. Justice is not given, it is fought for. And I fought and won. She closed the book, placed it on her nightstand, and turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, Marisol slept without fear. And outside, the cameras watched, silently, not for betrayal this time, but as silent guardians over a woman who had taken back her life,